Hi everyone, welcome to Inventive Mind. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Kayani. I'm an intellectual property and business law attorney. That means I do trademarks, copyright, patents, and I create entities like LLCs and benefit corporations, different type of corporations. And this channel, I like to bring in guests that I find interesting and also help the startup community and also other professionals out there who are managing different schedules. So I have one such interview today with Kim Meninger. She is an executive coach. She is a speaker. She's a consultant. She has her own podcast called Imposter Syndrome File. So she's really cool. She is an entrepreneur, I would say. And I met her because I'm part of Johns Hopkins Alumni Network. I did my graduate degree there. So she was actually giving a talk about leadership for women. And I asked her if she would like to come on this channel and chat with me. She have an amazing background. She went to Boston College. She have a bachelor's in psychology, and then she also has a MBA from Boston College, and she has a certificate in executive leadership from Cornell, and she's been in the corporate world for a while. So I will let her fully kind of tell you a little bit more about her corporate journey and where she's doing right now. But before that, I just like to add my disclaimer that anything here is for informational, educational purposes only. If you have a specific question or you want to connect with, please go see a professional that does that type of work. And if you would like to connect with Kim or me, I will put the information below. So with that in mind, welcome Kim. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much, Gayani. It's such a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the introduction too. As you mentioned, I did spend about half of my career at this point in the high tech space. It's getting further and further away. uh, but I was in relationship management positions for most of my career, leading teams, leading partnerships, and I really enjoyed it in many ways. It was a great opportunity to experience firsthand a lot of the challenges and opportunities that women face in these types of traditionally male dominated spaces. But there were certainly tough times as well. It was not always a great place for me. And so I came to a crossroads when my older son was born about 10 years ago exactly now, and just started asking myself some deeper questions, soul searching types of questions of when was I most satisfied in my career? Is this what I really want to continue to do? Where can I add the greatest value? Things that I really hadn't had a lot of time to think about when I was just trying to keep up with the pace of corporate life. And I was really fortunate to essentially stumble into coaching. I didn't really know much about it. A friend of mine asked me, hey, how about coaching? And I thought, do people really do that?
Right.
I don't really know. But I did look into it. I did some coach training, and the rest is history. I've been doing this for almost 10 years now, and I absolutely love it. These days, I really specialize in women's empowerment. I'm really passionate about helping women to become more confident, address things like imposter syndrome. I work with them around visibility, making sure that you're promoting yourself and getting recognized for all the great work that you're doing, and also expanding your influence through strategic relationships, navigating office politics, the kinds of things that we don't necessarily learn about in academic environments. We tend to learn the hard way. And so my goal is to be the resource to women that I did not have when I was going through it
I
myself.
know. I just feel like, honestly, I feel like one thing we don't really get in like training, because I've been through undergrad, graduate school, and then law school, but nobody really, like, unless you go take an elective class, I don't think they start, like psychology classes, just psychology 101, right? Like, you don't really talk about like empowering each other, the mindset stuff. It's all like kind of left to you to decide whether you're gonna go and invest your time in personal development. But I almost feel like somebody who invests time in personal development is such a better coworker, better leader, better friend, better spouse, all of these things together, right? So I think that's where like coaching have come into. I think there's a lot of people who realize they do need a coach, because and you want to connect with a coach that resonate for you and maybe have a similar kind of a background, because that could help for them to understand your journey. Because like Kim, who you've been in corporate world for a long time, before you came about, so you're kind of aware and you walk the walk before you launch, right? So I'm glad that you talked about your background a little bit. So let me ask you, when you I know this because I listened to your webinar when we did the Hopkins, but I would like my audience to know, when you got your undergrad, what were you heading toward?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for asking that. So, I have an undergrad in psychology, as you mentioned. And from the time I was old enough to know what it meant, I thought I would become a psychologist. That was just never in doubt. I overloaded on psych classes in college. I spent the first couple of years out of college preparing for a PhD program. And then when the time came to apply for a PhD program, I was just not in a place in my life where I could commit to another 5 years of full time school. And so, it was a really hard decision for me because I felt like I was walking away from my lifelong dream. It was my identity, really. But the way that I framed it in my mind was that one of two things will happen. I will either go down this other path into this corporate environment, and it will give me that extra push I need to figure out how to work my life around grad school, or it'll introduce me to something new and we'll see where it takes me. And that's ultimately what ended up happening. And I was so pleasantly surprised by how valuable my psychology background was to this corporate environment. It actually had a lot of relevance. All of the things that I had been learning had a lot of relevance, and I found myself understanding things that weren't necessarily as clear to people who didn't have that background.
Well, I think that's the key, right? Like we talk about like this implicit bias issues and the imposter syndrome and, the leadership styles. A lot of times, I'm part of like Women in Bio, which is a national organization, and we have some chats about like females who are at different levels. Some of them are like starting off in biotech companies, so at university. Some of them are like in the middle, or some of them are executives. And I think the challenge is that a lot of times when you get to the executive level or the leadership, if you're head of a team, you haven't been trained. Like you may be trained as a scientist, but you're not trained really in like soft skills of handling, right? How to manage a team, how to deal with different personalities. But bad managers actually make sometimes the work environments very toxic. Vice versa, good manager could actually even take a stressful work situation and make it into something is still worthwhile, like where the team will step up and deliver, even though it's stressful, just because the manager is really good. So I think that's a really and I think a lot of companies are, I think they're starting to kind of get it, because they have people like you who come and talk and do the trainings. But I don't think that's have been the case in last, like, it's kind of a more of a little more newer, I feel like, because I've been an in-house and I've been at places and I see all sorts of differences, and it do make a difference as to who stays, who leaves, attrition levels, the satisfaction level. And now we are seeing also the toxic environments that are been in the background for a long time, but finally people are saying, look, this is not okay. Like we hear it in media, these issues that are now finally like getting like not just a highlight this happened, but also like what can we do to make it change, right? So that's
Mhm.
my I would like to get your thoughts on it. And because I know you had some HR roles, it looked like you did a HR consulting. I could be wrong, so I saw it on your LinkedIn.
Oh yeah. I worked with, so I worked for Monster, the job board, and partnered with HR organizations who built the applicant tracking systems
Oh, wow.
for job searches. Yeah. So, but I love what you're saying, and I want to comment on that because there are a few ways that I think about this. I think number one of the challenges is that traditionally career advancement has been tied to people management, and so if you want to advance your career, you have no choice but to manage people, even if that's not what you
Yeah,
want. If that's not your personality, it's just not your area of expertise, you're not a natural fit for leadership. And so a lot of people have been promoted because they're great individual contributors, but they're not the right people to lead the team, like you said, and it has a ripple effect, right? The
yes,
other thing I think too is that you mentioned imposter syndrome. When we take on something new, when we step outside of our comfort zones, it's incredibly scary and anxiety provoking, and we feel like a fraud. We feel like, oh no, someone's made a huge mistake. I'm not really qualified to be here. And because we feel that way, we don't want to ask questions. We don't want to ask for help because we're worried we're going to expose that lack of readiness, that lack of preparation for the role. So instead, we tried to figure it out on our own. And there is no definitive textbook for how to lead people. It's one thing, like you said, if you're talking about a hard science, you're talking about a technical skill, you can go and do some research, you can ask some questions and get the information that you need. But when we're talking about managing different personality types, we're talking about mindset, those kinds of things aren't readily available to us. And so often we pull back when we really would benefit from leaning in and being more open about what we're feeling and the kind of help that we need. And we just don't know what we don't know.
so
The
true. Go ahead.
no,
Sorry.
no, I mean, I just don't think that the resources are available to managers the way that as readily accessible, and aren't necessarily always the right resources either that are made available.
Exactly. I feel like some of these resources that they have for management is just so old school, traditional. I feel like they need to kind of innovate and come to the next level up, because I find that, you can, like in law, because there's a lot of discussion about diversity issues, like retention. A lot of people, attorneys of color who go into big law, we are talking about AM 100s, those big law firms, they find, like, especially women of color leave that field really quickly. Within like 8 years, they're gone. So you see very few partners who have made it and who are, I mean, women in general have very few partnerships at those firms, but even fewer for women of color. So, and I think part of that is, and we have like articles going for like probably like 20 years, like, why do people leave? Why don't they stay? Like, but I think, we have these discussions, but sometimes I feel like it's still not moving the needle because they are not addressing the underlying issue. Because I joined a big firm, and then I knew that wasn't the setting for me, and I left within 5 months, 5.5 months, because I gave my 2 weeks notice. So, but I think the key is that to recognize you cannot take a square peg and fit it into a round hole or whatever, like, because the thing is, you not so I say that because when you bring in people of diverse backgrounds, they have diverse interests, they have diverse values, and that's what make them great, right? So you don't want to take somebody. There are training skills, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying skills isn't important, that's important, but you also had to be able to change both ways. While they had to pick up the skill set, the management, I think, really had to bring it down to the level of recognizing that there is different values sometimes in the people who are coming in. They're not the same background in attorneys you see in your firms. That's why the composition is usually the same, remains the same, because you're bringing in people who have similar backgrounds, but if you want to diversify and keep the diversification, you're going to have to make changes. It's not enough to ask the people who are bringing in, who are diverse attorneys, to change. I think you had to change from top down, too. Like you had to meet in the middle. I think I'm not saying one side or another. I think you had to bring it. The top people had to bring it down, and the people who are joining had to bring it up and meet in the middle. But it cannot be just the people who are coming in saying, "Well, we give you opportunity now, so now fit in," and these are our rules.
Exactly. You're so right. And I feel like as much as we talk about progress, as much as we talk about diversity and inclusion, there has been very little change in the traditional corporate structure and the expectations we have of workers. And so we talk about bringing people with different backgrounds, different perspectives, and bringing them all together, but we're essentially taking them from different boxes and then trying to put them all together into one box, right? and then,
Exactly. It's
and
so frustrating.
if it doesn't work, then that's your problem, right? You couldn't make it work, or
Yeah.
you decided to leave for whatever reason, instead of looking at the original box and asking, is this the best way to get the most out of people? So it really truly is a broken system, and it's going to need to be addressed in a much more holistic way than simply bringing people into the organization who may look different or who may think differently, but as you said, aren't going to fit into the structure that you have.
I feel like also what it does is when you try to take somebody from one background and fit them into the same boxes, you're losing the value they brought in. The value is that diversification, right? You're bringing in diverse background people, going to bring in diverse ideas. And
Mhm.
that's what you want. That helps you innovate. And that's where I like the entrepreneur world and where things are, because you are actually in a different like area. You're not in a box. There are kind of a lot of innovators. There's space to move. It's not fitting to like a square box. There's so many different options, and it's like you could build your own sandcastle, right? So,
Yeah, exactly. Because I do think you're absolutely right that when you put everybody into the same box, the real value that you're expressing is conformity, not diversity.
I love that. I love that. We should hashtag that for this discussion. Stop trying to enforce conformity.
Exactly.
So this is why I asked you to come in, because I wanted to have this kind of discussion, because I want to know from somebody who have been in the field, obviously have an experience in different levels, executive levels too. How do we make that? How do you think is a way to change this, like make actionable change, that if you really are a company out there and do want to make those steps, some ideas maybe that you see, because you have a psychology background, you are executive coach, so you are doing all this work. So, and there are changes. I don't want to like not recognize that too. I know there are places that are stepping up, and you see work environments that are changing, but just for anybody who's watching that might be like, okay, I want to implement something, what would you suggest?
Yeah, I think it's such a great question. And so I've thought a lot about this because I, as we're talking about, I truly believe that the system is broken or in serious need of improvement, right? And if we think about it that way, in some ways, it becomes a problem that I can't control, right? And so I become a victim of the system. And while that may be true to some extent, my personal bias is always towards self-empowerment. So while we continue along the path of progress, however painfully slow it may feel today, right? We have choices that we can make along the way about what is within our control and what we do about that. So to your point, I think we may not be able to influence change at the senior executive level because of where we fall in an organization, but we certainly have the power to look in the mirror and say, what am I doing? How am I contributing to this? And that might mean if I'm sitting in a meeting that I'm running and people are talking over other people, that I look at how that meeting is structured to create space for more voices. Right? If I'm if I am someone who holds sincere values of inclusion, but I look around and I see that people are being left out or people don't feel a sense of belonging, then I ask myself, what control do I have to be able to create a safer, more inclusive environment for the people around me, whether I lead the team or am simply an influencer on the team, right? So I think part of it is taking an ownership position in this, no matter where you sit in an organization, understanding what, if anything, you may be contributing to the challenges that we're facing, and what small steps we can all take to create greater change for ourselves as well as for the people around us.
Love that because I think you know I had to do this because I was just thinking I got Disney Plus. I've been watching Disney Plus lately, and they have Avatar on there, and I haven't watched Avatar since I was young. I watched it again recently, and I was too young to understand. I think the Avatar, like the movie with the James Cameron movie, right? Is it James Cameron? I forget like who did it, but that movie have so many layers. And what I really like, one of the lines they have is "I see you." Like
Mm,
this whole idea of, do you see the person that because I think all of us in our own way, we are trying to fit in, we are trying to do the best we can, and think what is best. But the question is, do you see the person across from you, that is struggling, that might have, like, they come from a different background, so they don't have the same upbringing. Or like if you're having a discussion about politics, like Black Lives Matter, and your firm, you're at a company corporate culture that say no politics, and somebody label that as a political thing. Well, if you're a person of color, or like black person, you're gonna feel left out. You may, or you may not care, because you're so been in so many of those situations. You're like, okay, that's just another place. um, so I think it's important to have that discussion, because sometimes the people may not see the tie-in, I think. So I think with this recent stuff that was happening with Black Lives Matter movement, like, a lot of people have stepped up to learn. And while the Black community has said, it's not our job to teach, you need to figure this out too, right? So that's the important thing too. And I think, and the allies play a huge role. I'm an ally of a lot of different causes, and I feel like sometimes the allies could step up in a way that a person who's identified in that category cannot. So,
yes,
you know
yes, absolutely. And that's another way that we can all look in the mirror and say, is there more that I can be doing?
like when you were talking about like these room meetings and the rooms, and if you have somebody who is kind of making a joke that might be insensitive, it may not affect you because you're not falling into that category, let's say. But it would be worthwhile. You may not want to call them out during the meeting, but maybe say it to the side. Sometimes I literally pull like private message somebody, or I will say, hey, by the way, I think that was a problem. Here is the problem. And sometimes it's because they didn't even think about it, right? They're not, they don't have that context,
Mm,
So I think we do a lot of things out of like, how much, how your emotional intelligence, right? Not everybody has the same level. And
yes, yes.
I will
You're
let you speak to that. I want to interview you. Sorry.
because I no 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 I love what you're saying. You're so right. And I do think that there's so much power in, you know, if you are the person who falls into the category of, you know, whether it's uh, you know, a joke about women or a joke about people of color or whatever it is, right? And you're the one who has to stand up for that. It's a tough position to be in, and there's always the chance that people are going to say, oh, you're so sensitive, and
Yes.
oh, it's your issue. But if somebody else, especially a white man, right, takes that other white man aside and says, look, dude, that's just not cool, right?
Exactly.
Listen in a different way. And so and that's something we can all do for each other. That's something that we can all be aware of, really try to consciously tune into, is where are these kinds of things happening and how can we all be responsible for creating a safer, more inclusive space.
I think there's a level of uncomfortableness sometimes, to step up. Like, I've been in meetings where somebody say something, and I'm like, and I would let it go, even though it made me uncomfortable to hear that. It's not I'm in compliant, like I'm okay with what they said. It's just I don't want to be the one stirring the pot, kind of
Mhm.
thing. But at the same time, I have realized after the whole George Floyd thing happened, like I can no longer be silent in those, like if somebody is talking about property damage versus somebody's life, and they're really more focused on the property damage,
Mm.
um I'm gonna say it. I realize, even if it make me uncomfortable to be in a group of attorneys, and if another attorney saying, well, my neighborhood, they had to, like, board up this stove, and I'm not condoning any property damage, by the way. That's not the
Sure.
purpose. But and that's, I think that's what sometimes people missing when we bring these up, is I'm saying there's a man who died, and there's brutality issues, and we need to focus on how unfair justice system is when that person who's supposed to protect them is the person who killed the person, so
Exactly.
and using those words too, right?
That's right.
So,
That's
and
right.
it's really, and I think as a person of color, like, I am a dark skinned South Asian, so I know some of I could empathize with some things, but there are
Mm.
things I don't have the experience, and I don't want to claim I understand, but I think we all can kind of be a little more open and say, hey, it's not
Absolutely. Yeah,
like,
you're I've been thinking about this a lot too, because I often joke about the fact that workplaces bring out our inner seventh grader, right? That middle school insecurity, that feeling of I want to conform, I want to fit in, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I'm afraid of making a mistake because it feels like that trigger of social rejection
yeah.
and peer pressure. And so we're all walking on eggshells in some way or another, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, in these workplaces. And these moments that you're talking about can be really triggering for us because we're worried. We don't want to get on the bad side of the person who said it, or something like that. But I think we all have an opportunity every day to make choices about whether we live our values or not, right? And first, you've got to know what those values are. And so if you don't, just take a step back and say, what is most important to me? And then to be really proactive in your workplace, in your life, to say, is this in alignment with my values? And if not, what choice am I going to make? Is it a choice to stand up to this person? Is it a choice to decide, you know what, this environment is just too toxic? There's just too much going on here for me to ever feel comfortable with this. So I'm going to go someplace else, right? There are any number of choices that might be available to us. And not doing anything is a choice too, but we have to live with it, right? So we have to decide, is that in alignment with who we want to be?
I mean, I truly, like, I honor people who make, like, I think we had to honor whatever the choices they are making. But sometimes I have people that I will hear, they constantly complain about how miserable their life is. But when you talk to them and you give them option, they are always like, oh, that's not going to work for me. So,
Mhm.
so, so in that kind of case, I would also be like, okay, well, this is their choice. Their choice is to stay but complain.
That's right.
You know,
That's right. Exactly. Yeah, and it's frustrating. It's so
right?
frustrating to be the person that's trying to help when the other person just shuts down everything that you're trying to do to help. But that's their choice too, right? And some people, that's the double-edged nature of self-empowerment. Because if you believe in self-empowerment, it means you're accountable for
Yes.
what happens in the world around you. You can't control it all, but you get to choose what you do in response to it, and whether you stay. But it also comes with a lot more responsibility. If you're a victim, of course, there's that sense that I don't have any control over my world, but I also don't have to take any personal responsibility because it's not my problem. Right?
And it's just, I think it's tough because I think sometimes also if you're at a different place, you hear different things, right? So somebody who's in a like a raw situation right now, who feel they're very much a victim, might hear this and feel really angry at us for saying this, right? That's part of it too, because I think even myself, I could see my different parts in my life I could go back to and see a point in time where if I had the same, like if I watch myself, I will be angry at what I'm saying. Like it's that I brought, like the idea that I may have caused it or have brought it on, But I think in a way, it's not to say that what happened to you was okay. It's not. But it's also to say, so you could now take a step for forward, and their resources, like working with somebody like Kim. So, right, like that's what coaches do. They help to kind of uplift and up level and kind of and type, depending on what type of coach you're looking for, and their philosophy and their strategies, because like you said, you have a certification training in some of the coaching. There's a lot of different trainings out there. That's where I say you want to connect with somebody you feel comfortable with,
Mm.
so so that's what I wanted to now bringing you to what you do, Kim. I would like you to kind of share what you do and what it is that like I know you have like your own executive a coaching circle. It sound like like I heard it in your imposter syndrome podcast afterwards.
Yes, 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 yes. Well, I'm really passionate about bringing women together in community because I do think that there are differences in our experience, and it's still tough to navigate our environments, and often we don't feel like we have a safe place to have conversations about these kinds of topics that we're talking about today. And so I want people to feel like they can come together, have a safe and honest conversation, get the support that they're needing, and also connect with each other, because one of the things that I think we don't necessarily do as well as men is network either, and a lot of that times that's a function of time. So to just be able to have this very efficient virtual way of connecting with people, especially during this moment, can help you in your career advancement as well. So that's one thing that I do, and it's free, and we meet every Thursday at 12 o'clock Eastern, and it's just, again, an informal space. And then I do other things, like I do speaking to different groups, I do group women's leadership programs, and then I do one-on-one coaching.
I had to say I loved the program you had for Hopkins, How to Influence. I forget the title of the program because it was like a month and a half ago, but I think it's such an important point, especially I live in California now. What's great about COVID time is it made everything kind of more virtual. So this is why I was able to join a Hopkins alumni group event, because I don't know if they had events like this before, but for sure I wasn't aware of it because I wasn't looking for it. I was thinking if I'm going to go to a meeting with Hopkins, I had to be the San Diego Hopkins group, not the alumni network like webinar. Like, so what's great is COVID have given us like taken down some of the boundaries and open it up, right? I
That's
mean,
right.
there are challenges, but I think there's also tons of opportunities. And I like what you were saying, opportunity to kind of do things virtually and realize we don't need the certain things we thought we needed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
Absolutely. It does keep things in perspective, or put things in perspective, for sure. And that is the silver lining, I think, of this moment, is the opportunity to connect across barriers that we would normally never have had the opportunity to do, whether it's geography or just connecting with people with different backgrounds. There's all kinds of ways to connect these days that we didn't really think about before.
and I think what I wanted to add with the webinar thing you did was California have an initiative that came into effect that says every public company that is in California must have a, I think it's every public company. I don't remember because I don't do that type of law per se, that must have a board member that is a woman,
Mm,
female board members, to kind of help women to get them on boards. Because if you look at 80 to 90% of the boards of the companies, they don't have that many females, but we make up 51% of the population. So why? And it's I'm sorry to say this because it's my channel, so I will say it is BS to say they have enough, not enough qualified women,
right.
because there are a bunch of qualified women. It's just the opportunity doesn't come to that. And if you know how boards work, a lot of times it goes to who you network with. And like you said, men network little better sometimes. I think I think also what we want to do is, one thing I really like about what we are doing virtually is also we don't need to do the same way others do it. Like men, like they do like golfing and that's their networking thing, let's say. We don't need to follow that, for me, please. I think you could make your own thing. And that's why I launched my own channel too, because I wanted to have these discussions and do this kind of a passion project and talk about these things without somebody telling me, you know, what I couldn't know, shouldn't know, like, oh, maybe do it this way. And also, I wanted to put it out there. Here's a woman of color who's an immigrant, who's a, you know, like I have a training background. I was in biomedical research for 13 years. I was at NIH for 9 years. I was, I'm a trained attorney. I've been now attorney for 6.5 years, almost going into my 7th year. And I launched my own practice, but I was at a public corporation before, a couple of firms before. So, like, and I do intellectual property. Like, that's a field, like we were just having a discussion, how many people are there that have like this background kind of thing. But I think that's the thing, to be seen, because I want it, and internet does give that opportunity. So
Really, well, I love what you're saying too about creating our own opportunities, because it goes back to being in the box. And if the only opportunities we have to build that visibility are by doing things that are like wildly outside of our comfort zone, by golfing, going to, back in the day with strip clubs, right? Things that just are um, not things that we would ordinarily choose to do and that don't bring out our confidence and our best selves, then we're not benefiting from that experience anyway. So absolutely finding ways to more authentically be out there connecting, adding value is a much better option for many reasons.
I, I know I want to honor your time, and we have. I think we could chat for a long time because I think we are in a really good synergistic place, and maybe you even do it another time. So, but I wanted to get your tips because I did ask you to come up with some tips. So I will let you kind of go to that.
I was thinking a lot about this, and so some of this we've talked about, but I think that to reiterate that point about the fact that we are in the midst of transformation that's happening slowly but is moving forward, to really ask ourselves, where is my place in this movement, in this moment? What can I do to empower myself to take action and not wait for other people to determine my fate? So I think that's a really big tip. It's a hard one sometimes, and I think that leads to the second one, which is really taking time out of our busy lives, which feels sometimes impossible to do, but to push the pause button, reflect, and really understand who we are and what we want from our lives and from our careers. And this goes back to what we talked about with values too, right? So many of us are living other people's values, other people's dreams, where we're doing what's expected of us, either because our parents wanted it this way, or time after time after time, I hear from women who are saying, well, my friends are getting ahead of me, right? Or, I need to keep moving along or I'm going to stagnate. But it's not because it's coming from a place of, that's what I want to do. That's what I'm driven to do. So we have to stop and ask ourselves, what am I here to do? What do I want? How do I want to contribute my strengths to the world, right? And then beyond that too, we've talked about imposter syndrome. That is one of um, my key areas of focus because I have a long personal journey with imposter syndrome. And I do believe that our ability to effectively reach our potential, achieve our goals, depends on our belief, our genuine belief that we belong in whatever room we're in. And if we doubt that we deserve the role that we have, that we're not adequately trained or equipped to do the role effectively, it's going to have a ripple effect on how we show up elsewhere. So making sure that if that is a challenge for you, that you are addressing it as a root problem before you even tackle any of the other things that we're talking about.
I do have a question on that because I think that's bring up a really something that personal for me because I feel like sometimes because you look different, you are different, you have a different background. When you have a question, you almost wonder, is it because I don't have the like I seen my colleagues who are not the same background who have similar questions and they will say it, and for me, I almost at sometimes remember thinking, oh, I don't know if I could ask these questions because they're going to think it's because I'm from this background or I'm this or that. How do you address that? Just kind of, I know this is like a 1 minute fix I'm asking for like years.
It's a great question too, and I think it speaks to the challenge of being an only, or of being one of very few. So if you're the only person of color, if you're the only woman in the room, you naturally feel a sense of you feel that difference almost as is somehow making you less than, right? And so we often feel, and I know this is very true for women because I hear it all the time and I've experienced it myself, is that we're hanging by a thread, right? They're like one false move and this whole
Yeah.
thing blow up, right? And so when it comes to that moment that you're talking about where I have to ask a question, it feels like we are putting ourselves at great risk, our reputations, our credibility at great risk by asking that question. So part of it is getting past our own stories we tell ourselves and recognizing, having the self-trust to say, if I have a question, there's a legitimate reason for it because I'm a smart enough person that, I've gotten to where I am. So this must be a real question that I have. And then to also own it. I always say go on offense rather than defense. So often what you hear is women saying things like, I know this is such a stupid question and I should know the answer to this. But well, when you package it that way, right?
I know, right? You're just setting yourself up.
Exactly. But if instead you own it and you just say, hey, you know what? I'm trying to learn more about this and I have a question. Can I run this by you? More than often than not, they're not going to think twice, right? So
I
I think
love that.
we show up, and I think is more important than and influences how they respond in turn.
Do you think actually that's such a good point? How you frame a question. This is something I learned from my sister who's an attorney too. And she will tell me sometimes that, because I got in a feedback that I didn't like, and she will like, you realize what you did, right? You asked the question to set yourself up. You need to frame it in a different way. Like she will point out, like when I was studying for the bar exam, and I don't want people to tell me all their horror stories, but that's what they do. And then she was like, you need to stop saying like acting like you're asking for advice. Instead say, yes, I'm studying for the bar exam, I have a plan. Like, be confident about it.
Exactly. And if you come with that sense of ownership of the legitimacy of your question, and there's no shame, there's no apologizing, no defending, right? Then other people have no reason to think that you are asking an inappropriate question. And if they do, that's on them. That's not on you. Right?
Exactly. That you might run into somebody else's insecurity and they're not sure, then they might take offense, not based on you, but based on their own insecurity that they're hiding behind. So
Right.
I can help but ask you this. What does imposter syndrome mean to you? Because I hear you say that in your podcast, and I've been thinking about it because, we're going to do a podcast together. So I thought now that I have you on my channel.
You turned the tables on me. That's great. Yeah. So imposter syndrome is, to me, it's such a relief to have a term for that feeling of I'm a fraud, of I don't deserve to be in the role that I'm in today. Somebody made a huge mistake and they don't realize that I don't actually know what I'm doing. Right. And so when I was first introduced to that term, I thought, oh my gosh, thank God it's not just me. Because so many of us walk around feeling not only like we're the only ones, but there's so much shame around it. So we can't talk about it because then we're going to tell people that we really aren't qualified, right? Our deep, dark secret will be exposed. So I really am on a personal mission to destigmatize it, to stop hiding, to stop pretending that we've all got it figured out, and to just say out loud what we're all feeling so we can normalize it, support each other, and move forward.
I remember I listened to your first podcast episode and you did talk about, I think, the Amy Cuddy's, the TED Talk, and that's how it was a turning point. So,
Mm.
and this is why I really wanted to connect because I think you're doing something entrepreneurial too. So, starting your own podcast to kind of like dispel this and bringing your whole self to what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad we met because I feel like it's so great to meet other strong entrepreneurial women who are trying to make a difference. And I just feel like we're all in this together. And it's so nice to be able to collaborate and complement each other's skills. You obviously have a very different place in the world with your legal background than I do, but we have very similar values, and I think we're trying to do similar things. So it's so powerful to have these kinds of opportunities.
Empower each other, really. That's one of my core values, I realize. So it's what I can do. With that, I don't close off my channel without asking, what do you do to ground yourself, like from the chaos of what's happening? What bring you back into like that okay point?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I am embarrassed to admit this.
Ooh, this
But
should be good.
it's gonna sound terrible, but like my distraction from the craziness of the world and my sort of way of relaxing is true crime podcasts.
Wow.
Terrible thing, but I have a psychology background. I'm fascinated by those types of stories and things, and so I spend a lot of time listening to podcasts, and I also do jigsaw puzzles with my son. So that is always really fun too. We always have a giant puzzle on the table that if I take a breath and need a break, I can just go over there and work on it for a little bit, and then get back to my day.
Actually a mindfulness technique. So usually, because I'm a mindfulness enthusiast, I would call it. I think, yeah, having puzzles where you could really, log in, and I do think having entertainment as a tool it's a good tool, because
Mm,
if you could check out of that thinking brain, the inner critic that's keep going, and you could focus on something is still bringing awareness to some, maybe not within, but still
mhm.
to something else, and just kind of bringing it together. So with
Yeah.
that, Kim, I can't believe the time went so fast, and usually my interviews are like 30-45 minutes. I think it's a little bit longer, but I think it's totally worth it. So thank you so much for joining me all the way from Baltimore. Where do you live?
Boston area, the
Oh, you're
Boston.
in Boston. Yeah. Thank you for joining me today. And for those who joined and watching this until now, thank you. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, share, and let us know what you think, and I will put Kim's information below so you could check her out and her imposter syndrome files below. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.